Hi, I'm Wade Harvey, and thanks for watching part 7 of putting the pieces of .NET together. This section will focus on software development tools, Visual Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, and so forth. Okay, what tools do you need? Well, there's 3 basic ones. You need SQL Server, you need SQL Server Management Studio, and you need Visual Web Developer at a very minimum. And where can I get the Express free versions? Well, you can go to www.microsoft.com/express. And where do the tools reside? Well, they all reside in the program files. Visual Studio resides under Microsoft Visual Studio in the program files. Several utilities are inside this Microsoft SDKs / Windows. For example, the GAC utility, which is used to update the assemblies in the GAC. Then for SQL Server, the programs for the SQL Server reside in the bin directory of the program files, and the databases themselves reside in the data folder in that directory. Here. Okay, now we get to an exciting part, I think, is what happens when I compile a page. Well, it starts out where you're typically, this is how it goes, your source code is up in your program files, Microsoft Visual Studio, / projects if it's a project you're working on, or website, it's in the websites folder. It's typically where we start putting our source code. Then you can right click on the project, property pages, and select build options in Visual Studio to specify where you want the precompiled files and the solution files, SLN and SUO, to go. And the SLN is just a list of all the projects inside the solution, and the SUO is the user options that were specified, how they want it to look when it comes up in Visual Studio. So then there's a precompiled version consists of your ASPX pages and the DLLs for the code behind. The DLLs are the Microsoft Intermediate Language that will get converted to native language of ones and zeros at runtime. And compiling involves bringing the pieces needed from the net framework and from the global assembly cache together. And the compiled version goes into the Windows Microsoft.NET framework in this temporary ASP.NET files folder. We've talked about that before, and we used the ILDASM to take a look at what the intermediate language looks like in an earlier part of the series. Okay, what happens when a page executes? Now, I got this from a Microsoft page, and I listed the page there to give them credit. And what happens is the client is on their computer, and they enter a URL in the browser. That URL is translated into an IP address and goes across the internet and comes to the Internet Information Services web server. And from there, if it's a ASPX page, the application is turned over to the ASP.NET Runtime Engine, and the application manager creates an application domain for the first request for that application. And that sets up a hosting environment, which is a protected sandbox for the application to run in. And then here's just a restatement of how it happens. The The client creates an HTTP request, and that URL is the domain name servers translate that into an IP address, which is like a telephone number that's associated with each computer that's on the internet. And so that gets the request down to the server. And if the domain name server hasn't populated on the internet, if you've got a new domain name, a new URL, you can associate it temporarily by going to this file here in Windows System 32 drivers, etc. host, and you just type in the IP address and the URL that you want to associate with that, and then you need to remember to delete that after it's been populated on the internet. It usually takes 4 to 24 hours for it to populate across the internet when you create a new URL domain name, when you buy a domain name from like GoDaddy, whatever. Then from there it goes to IIS, or ASP.NET Development Server. Even when you're running on ASP.NET Development Server, it is using an IP address. It's 127.0.0.1 slash port number. That's where that is listening. So the general steps are the ISAPI takes the request and decides whether it's an ASP.NET. If it is ASP.NET, it creates an app domain the first time and starts the HTTP runtime takes over. Okay, here's another picture. This shows that you can have several clients submitting their request, and they all go into this one large application domain, but each request creates an HTTP context, and the HTTP context consists of their request and the response, and this is an HTTP application object. So these all are run in the runtime in the application domain, so they can run simultaneously. You can have 3 people asking for different things in the application, and runtime will carry them all out for you. Okay, IIS, our development server, the ISAPI looks at the extension and turns ASPX extension over to ASP.NET. If it's a .NET page, ASP.NET runtime will take care of it. And ASP.NET creates the application domain the first time and then starts the application request. And the HTTP runtime can handle multiple contexts. Inside of each one there's a request and a response. And the request and the response are for both the page and the cookies involved in the request and the response. Okay, and then HTTP runtime does the following. It validates the request. If you have validate request equals true, which is the default at the top of every ASPX page, this checks for malicious markup of JavaScript injection, cross-site scripting injection. And if you've specified that you wanted any URLs remapped in your web config, that'll happen by the HTTP runtime. And it uses the Net framework to convert the Microsoft Intermediate language in the temporary ASP.NET files, and it also uses what's in the GAC to convert those into the native code for that machine, which is the ones and zeros. Another thing the HTTP runtime does is it checks for authentication and authorization. Who is this person that's asking for it, and do they have correct rights to access this resource? And finally, it invokes anything that implements the HTTP handler to process requests. And for the ASPX, this is the page handler.